Courtney, Bridget, good evening. The National Weather Service says the 2011 flood ranks number 3 on the list when it comes to bad floods that have happened here in Pierre, right behind floods that happened in 1952 and way back in 1881. Now consider this for context. The Missouri River's flood stage here in Pierre is right around 13 feet. In 2011, the river crested nearly 7 feet above that. This was a natural disaster, to be sure, but this was also an event that could have been prevented. This is the soundtrack of the 2011 Missouri River flood. Water pulsating out of the Oahe Dam at the frenzied record-setting rate of more than 160,000 cubic feet per second. If you saw this in person, you wondered if the dam would be able to stand up to the strain. You should know Governor Dennis Dugard was thinking the same thing.
That was especially worrisome, not only because of the flooding it meant, but also you worry about the infrastructure itself and having that much water pressure and that much flow.
When the 2011 floods hit, Dugard had been in office just 4 months. When he was told just how bad the flood could be, he felt the weight of his new office.
You really have a lot of self-doubt. Am I going to measure up? Am I going to do the right things at the right time?
Just months before, he had attended a conference for new governors, and he was given a very specific piece of advice.
One of the first things you should do as a new governor is get to know your FEMA representative and be ready for a disaster, because that could happen at any time.
While Dugard was marking 4 months in office, his predecessor, Mike Rounds, was marking 4 months out of office.
We were frustrated and trying to figure out what we could possibly do in a united effort to try to save our homes.
5 years ago, I caught up with Rounds as he was feverishly working to build flood levees to protect his riverfront home. He says it is a day he will never forget.
I remember it very well because we had about 5 days from the time that they told us we were going to have a problem until we knew it was going to be a very serious problem. Not hardly enough time for neighbors throughout the entire Missouri River Valley to be able to respond.
The problem was a 1-2 punch of abnormally high snowfall in Wyoming and Montana, 212% of a normal season's level. When all that snow melted, it went into the Missouri River and headed for central South Dakota.
Okay, let me get this right. You're telling me the water's going to go up, our town could flood, and I think what you're saying is I need a plan of action right away.
Pierre Mayor Lori Gill remembers the day she was told a historic flood was just days away from hitting the city. The first priority was sandbags. Coming in a real close second, getting levees built to protect downtown.
This town was like a war zone because there was dust everywhere. They were building levees and doing sandbags, and everybody was out there trying to take care of ourselves, and that really was the spirit of the whole thing.
At the State Emergency Operations Center, Governor Dugard made the decision to activate 2,000 South Dakota National Guardsmen for emergency flood duty. But time was not on anyone's side, and a lot of water was in the Missouri River system. The governor had no choice but to issue a warning.
And so we were telling everyone in those communities, we're going to try and get these levees up in time to hold the water back, but we don't know if we're going to make it. And so don't count on us, assume the worst. Even if we do get them up in time, they may not hold.
Meantime, the waters began creeping into Pierre. They overtook the Hillsview Golf Course, where Dean Hymans is the superintendent.
We lost all 18 fairways and the roughs associated with it. We lost 14 greens. About 6 of them went completely underwater. The rest were above the floodwaters, but we couldn't get to them.
And at the A Cut in Style salon, Arnie Gutenkopf, who has owned the place for decades, had to get his staff and supplies to higher ground, leaving their building adjacent to the river and setting up shop in the St. Charles Hotel.
People couldn't find us, didn't know where we were, and we lost a lot of customers that summer.
All the while, the Oahe Dam was pumping out a consistent rate of water with virtually no end in sight.
I was flying out of Pierre, and you could see in the Oahe Reservoir a whirlpool, like you'd see in your bathtub. When you pull the plug, there's a whirlpool. There was a whirlpool in Lake Oahe that we had to warn boaters to stay away from because it was essentially coming out of the dam so much.
It took nearly 3 months, but the Missouri River and Pierre began to fall, leaving behind millions of dollars in damage and a lot of questions. How did the Army Corps of Engineers not realize this flood was imminent?
Well, I still call it the 2011 Corps flood because I think that they were responsible for it.
Now Senator Mike Rounds is still asking that question 5 years later, and recently took congressional action to try and make sure what happened in 2011 never happens again.
So this year, in one of our bills, in the energy and water bill, we actually put together and we put in $2 million that we reallocated from other areas in the Corps' budget into actually putting in the study to find out exactly what they need in order to forecast these types of situations in the future.
As anyone who has ever been through one will tell you, a flood is not a one-and-done event. 5 years later, work is still being done in this city to either fix or clean up what the flood did here. But as they showed during the flood, the people of the city of Pierre are more than up to that challenge. We are reporting live tonight with photojournalist Troy Timmerman. I'm Brian Allen, KSFY News.